In 1989, during another attempt to get a project off the ground in America, Alan Clarke was diagnosed as having cancer. In July of 1990, he died. Had he lived longer, perhaps he would have gone on to make more movies and receive the recognition his huge talent justly deserves.
I don't think the American industry could have coped with someone as socially and politically obsessed and passionate as he was.
I remember a couple of times he was over in the States and he used to just talk about the sort of stuff that they'd offer him, or, you know, expect him to work with a big star, and he just wouldn't work with a star that he felt was not right for the part, because it would have been compromise. And I think, you know, throughout his career in a way, and I think that's probably the biggest thing about his work, he didn't like compromising.
I think the feature films that he made were probably the least interesting part of his work, simply because there were commercial pressures that made it impossible to do the kind of work that he'd done at the BBC.
I think Alan actually passionately loved television and was aware that if you did something that was really very good, it could reach 12 million people, for God's sake.
Television was regarded as very, very important back in the 60s. It seems to be much less important now. At the time, it was a tremendously new, sort of democratic, populist medium. And you could do material that got you closer to people, give an account of life that seemed relevant, you know, to Alan, who, so far as I understand it, you know, was a working class lad. One of the things that television told was the history of ordinary people in England, ordinary working class people in England. Well, the cinema just didn't sort of deal with that.
He's a rare example of a driven filmmaker. I mean, most filmmakers do it because it's interesting, exciting, involving, pleasant way of life, stimulating. Alan is driven, and Alan is driven to speak on behalf of people whom he feels are getting a raw deal. And he's driven by a passion to express what he doesn't see expressed anywhere else in the culture.
If you said to me, what is a man like, I would say Alan, you know, in some rather old-fashioned way. Men in my world aren't like John Wayne, but Alan did seem to be what a man was like, and he was hard-working, and he was a serious man.
I don't know whether he ever thought he'd make a difference. I think he was probably canny enough to realise that perhaps it wouldn't. But maybe that if it just touched a few people, then maybe that was enough. But I think it was as much to do with the process of the work itself that he just loved. And, you know, I think he would have continued, you know, he'd still be doing it. There wasn't really anything else.
Well, he's a poet. I mean, that's the thing that people miss about him. He wasn't in the slightest interested in brutality or violence in itself. He was interested in the poetry of the pain of the lives of people who are victims.
Got to drop, man, drop.